You are listening to Something Rather Than Nothing. Creator and host, Ken Vellante. Editor and producer, Peter Bauer.
Bad conversation. Yet another bad conversation. Alienation, bitter confrontations. Paper thin now, young. Low sinking in. Oh, I'm sinking in. Somehow reminds me too much of all I've seen before. If only I could just check all my baggage at the door. This bleak winter light I'll somehow transform. I do without status, I do without money too, but not to be a trampled flower right after I grew. Guess I never knew you, just a bad, bad, all around. Wonder what I did it for, to stand as a victim in an endless war.
This is Ken Vellante with the Something Rather Than Nothing podcast, and I'm really excited to get a guest I've been trying to get for a little while. Anna Mae, singer-songwriter. Anna Mae, thanks for coming on to the show, and welcome onto the show.
Thanks for having me, Ken. I'm glad I could do this.
Yeah, it's a great pleasure. I wanted to jump into about, where you come from and where you played, and, just your relationship with music. I was excited, at least when I first saw you, that saw Connecticut. I'm from Rhode Island, and then I know you played out on the West Coast as well. Introduce listeners to your music and where you make it and what you do.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm from Connecticut. I actually have recorded all my albums in Rhode Island. I don't know if I told you that.
Yay!
Yeah, I like Rhode Island. Rhode Island's a little more fun than Connecticut. And yeah, with this guy Steve Rizzo, kind of near Newport, but like in Portsmouth, Rhode Island. And we've been doing. I always say I do like minimalistic folk, and a lot of my music has a lot of spiritual content, just laced with like philosophical questions and ideas, and so it's a little bit different from traditional folk. And I listened to a lot of jazz growing up. My grandparents and my parents, my dad's side of the family are all musicians. So my grandmother, who's no longer here, was a music teacher and guitarist, and they lived in Marin in California and moved to Connecticut. So I got to grow up around a lot of music all the time. I was kind of forced into it, but I grew to love it and just kind of carved my own thing from whatever I was taught, which was kind of radically different from what I was brought up with. But yeah.
Yeah, well, I appreciate and enjoy your music and your take on it. And it's great to hear recording in Rhode Island. Although I know it as Portsmouth, but I know that's not the proper pronunciation. I know it is Portsmouth, but
No, it is. Nice.
great area. I want to tell you something. When you mentioned Newport, I some of my greatest experiences as far as listening to music been in Newport, not a place I went to a lot. I grew up in Pawtucket, but distinct memories of Newport Folk Festival, and one time with the Newport Jazz Festival, being out on a boat out in the bay, and having the music come off, and if it was getting too hot,
Yeah,
jumping in the water off the boat, and I'm like, oh my god, music all day,
that's amazing.
and the folk festival, I remember seeing, Sarah McLachlan, Michelle Shocked, Randy
Ooh,
Newman.
I
It's
love
just
Michelle Shocked. I never
Michelle
hear her
Shocked.
name. That's so
Yeah,
cool. Yeah.
yeah. I'd never seen her before, and actually, that was one of the more fun shows I can remember. It was a long time ago, but Michelle Shock
Oh, she's
rocked.
awesome.
She
Yeah. And
she
she really dipped off the radar. Yeah, Newport Folk is cool. I've been a few times. Who have I seen there? Old Crow Medicine Show. I forget which years I went there, but yeah, always super hot. And Newport's a cool place. Like it's a real mix of. There definitely, there is like an art scene there. It's not
Yeah.
overwhelming like a place like Portland or something, but there's stuff there, and it's a cool place. I went there in May for my birthday and just had fun, walking around and taking
Yeah.
in the scenery. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, there's Newport's a kind of a strange area, and one of the pieces, like, I've been around in Newport. There's a little bit of grit in Newport, that kind of
Yeah.
introduces that kind of I kind of dig that piece too, and it's great to chat about that, and bringing up that time there. So and of course Rhode Island. So tell me, you're starting to talk about with your music. Was there a moment for you as you're going along, and I ask this of artists, where you're like, I'm an artist, or like it, or something has happened, and some folks say it's always been that way. They don't even know how to breathe differently. What's been your relationship to art?
Yeah. Like I said, I was around it a lot and around music, but it was always more like the classical opera, like more of a rigid study, like just surrounded by great musicians. And I think for me, um, yeah, I always was a little bit dissatisfied with what I was presented with as a child. Like I do remember that, like the feeling of uh, just not fully like integrating in my environment and needing to step away to process it. And I think that's a very artistic kind of thing. And I think I didn't quite know what it was. I was like, what is this? This need to like decompress or step away from things in order to write about it. And I always did write. My mom saved a lot of like journals. I did just from a very young age, but kind of more so than like a writer than a singer is what I always thought of myself as. I'm always reading a lot of books, and So yeah, I would, that feeling, that identity of artist it goes back a long ways for sure. Um, just this feeling of either like depression or I had a lot of that as a kid. I was just a very pensive, quiet
Yeah.
kind of kid, and a lot of, even now, just everything that I was presented with was either very like loud or just not quite what I wanted. And so I made stories and I made poetry and songs, and eventually a lot of that just kind of grew and turned into actual songs with melodies, and really was just a way to process everything that I experienced. And yeah, just very sensitive. So I think all those qualities, when you talk to other people who do art, they kind of, say the same thing, and we can unite around that we always knew,
Yeah.
this was what we needed to do. And like, if I didn't write, I would feel strange, or if I didn't somehow process my experiences that way, I wouldn't feel complete. Yeah,
Yeah.
long time.
Yeah. You mentioned reading a lot of books and such. I just heard that. I'm an avid book reader, and for me, I think about all the stories in books, and then I start to think about music like as a continuum. I think that's one of the great things about doing the podcast and talking to artists is kind of telling stories and hearing from others and their experience. With art, for you, I wanted to ask you what you think art is. What is art, as an artist? Like, what is it that you're trying to create?
Yeah, I think it's like a way to respond to your environment. We have all of this stuff, life happening, and art is like a reaction to living. And I think it's kind of intended to either solve problems. I think art can solve problems, it can create problems or disrupt the balance, for good or for bad. And I think too, it can change minds. I know like a lot of books and just pieces of art have changed the way I think. And that's, I think, what I would intend, with a lot of what I write. I always say, my kind of tagline is alternative, tragic, Americana, bleeding heart, stream of consciousness poems, invocations for peace, and, kind of resisting judgment. So I think a lot of music that I created just came from a place of trauma or discontent, and wanting to change the way people think about the world and others. And that's kind of a broad thing to want to do with like one 4-minute or 10-minute song in my case. But I think it's a worthy thing to do, to just continue to put it out there. As I grew up, I just encountered a lot of hate, and I was bullied a lot at school. So a lot of my writing is a reaction to that. And I think what's interesting about like trauma is that it's so embedded in our nervous systems that it's cyclical, and it's, unfortunately, it's never ending, and we all have it. And
Yeah.
we tend to repeat those traumatic moments. So it's a really easy thing to write about, in that it's so powerful and so present all the time. Happy things are that way too, but I think trauma can be just like a unique thing to write about. So in terms of just art and why I create it, I think it's this overwhelming need to want to change how people view things. And I think the older you get, like for my childhood, I think in ways I had rose-colored glasses on, and as you move through the world, you really do see like how society is structured around judgment and hate in so many ways. So I think it's just my little way of trying to get a message over that and across, and to do it in like a somewhat metaphysical way. I don't know. I think My music isn't super literal, and that's why I have a hard time reaching people sometimes. But yeah, just bigger ideas and bigger concepts. That's kind of what I want to tackle or hope to tackle. So
Yeah, I wanted to. There's something I had recently learned as far as just with trauma. And it was a very radical way for me to understand it. It was just so different than other type of things, and I want to tell you about it. Um, I was doing an art class with Susie DeVille in a book I've talked about on the show, which is Buoyant, and some great practices around art that are really inspired by the artist's way. Movement, mindfulness, morning pages, etc. Great stuff, and I've talked about it on the show. One really, really cool thing that helped me understand trauma or our individual experience in a very different way was something she described as, imagine this: in New Zealand or Australia, there's a massive shore. And think about surfing, right? Think about some of those big waves that come in. I'm sitting there. I don't know I know how waves happen. I was like, how do these big waves? But there was this one incredible piece where she related it, and it was called the underground geography leading up to the shore, which is called bathymetry. And within our individual bathymetry, like imagine our jagged pieces inside and water forcing its way through. There can be glory in the expression, the big waves that come out, the big artistic creations. And there's a way to just understand our individual, for me, to understand my individual makeup, and that there was some glory in that dynamic, because you can't radically move or just kind of throw away the rocks going up to the shore. They're going to be there, but it creates this display or artistic display.
yeah, that's really beautiful. Yeah,
And I just thought that it
in the
honored
process.
what we know about ourselves or what we struggle with ourselves, but we're still going to live, breathe, and create. And that was just really helpful for me to think about our uniqueness as creators. And those big waves are pretty damn cool.
Yeah, no, it's like something cataclysmic is beautiful and radiant. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's art. It's really
yeah,
cool.
that helped me a lot. What's the role of art? And you've been talking about this a bit. I mean, you create so, but what do you think the role of art is? And do you feel it's any different now? We're chatting late July 2023. Is it any different now?
I think so. I think, yeah, in a time of unrest and climate crisis, I think art has a really big role to play. I think for a long period, maybe it was more, well, I think depending on different periods, art means different things, but for some periods of time, it was maybe more of a distraction. Um, and I think now it can really be a pivotal piece in solving problems and just shifting the course of thought. And we really need that in this country for sure. But if you look through history, there's been so many of those things where something artistic was able to really profoundly impact an entire culture or generation and change the way things were. So I think that's coming, and it really does feel in a lot of places, even where I grew up. I'm back at home right now, and for years, I was just always complaining about how anti-artistic it was, and um, how difficult it was to just feel artistic, and I always felt like I had something to go up against here. But the last couple of weeks, it's been interesting to just see, there's all these like pop up artistic things, visual arts and music, and there's good things happening. So I think it's just the natural reaction to things going poorly and moving in the wrong direction politically or in any way. I think people just naturally have to again, it's experienced trauma and experiencing trauma and digging deeper to kind of come into connection with art, because I think art is intrinsic. I think we all really have that capability, and we all are artists, but it's just a matter of refining towards that course, and that can look different at different periods of life. I think there have been times for me that I've just been intensely creative, like in COVID, where it was almost debilitating. I didn't really live in real life, and then other times where I'm less so that way. But I think it's just about accessing it and having the right people and environments in order to get to that good stuff, which is really who we are. I think we're artistic, spiritual beings. So.
Yeah, yeah. Is Before we came on, we were talking about, and through us discussing here, kind of female artists, kick-ass artists that really, really, I'd say, really important to me, and expressed Michelle Shock, Sarah McLachlan. I've always had an affinity towards singer-songwriters. Tori Amos. My queen is Polly Jean Harvey, PJ Harvey, who I adore
Oh
to
yeah, yeah.
no ends that I can conceive of. And Fiona Apple, and I think recently, before we came on, just talking recently, Sinead O'Connor had passed away, and I think there's been some, I don't know, contact with the deeply unfair, at times horrific treatment of female artists culturally, especially non-conforming presentation here, body type, way they sing, too much anger. Sinead, right? The critique of too much anger. And for me, I'm still, feeling all that, and somebody's sticking up. And we're talking about some of the things which need to happen 30 years ago. But I talked to a lot of female artists, and I talked to a lot of artists, and I don't know what the Latin term for it is, but shit you have to deal with. How do you feel things are now? I look at some of those. You go back at the pioneers and people trying to create space. It's the way I look at it. How do you feel about that? Where things are now, and the things you have to navigate, say, within the industry or performing as a woman?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I have kind of, yeah, I mean, so I'm a very introverted person, and I think I just consider myself a writer, and I do love singing, and I love performing, and but I am not really like conditioned to being in the spotlight. I'm not someone that craves that. I'm not an extrovert, so it takes a lot of energy out of me, and um, I have dealt with a lot being in the spotlight. I grew up with a musical family, and I was performing and singing with them in public. So I've had this very like public life, but I'm not a very public person. I don't feel that way. I do feel a need to get the art out there, but the other stuff, for me, it is not really where it's at. And I think there's a lot of people who are like that. But as far as being a female artist, I've been criticized for being too sensitive, but I've also been criticized for being too aggressive, or the word predatory came up recently, and I really been sitting with that one and trying to decipher that. It really does seem like anything that you do as a female artist is under scrutiny or criticized. I had an eating disorder for many years. I was anorexic twice, and I recovered. So, that was an interesting thing to go through. I was really praised for being incredibly unhealthily thin, and I was performing, I look back and I think, how on earth did I do that? I was barely eating anything. Mentally, it was in a horrible place. And, and then you come on the other side and you're too curvy, you're too fat or whatever. And I think it all at least for me, it brings me to a point of really not caring. I just care so much less. And I think the criticism that I've dealt with has been really hard, really paralyzing. But I was just talking to one of my best friends who's also been through a lot. And, she just said, I'm grateful for these traumatic experiences because they've made me stronger. And, but it's not true of just performers. I think women in general are just really targeted. And personally, I don't think it's getting better. I think, in Oregon, that's, one of the places I really like. I felt a sense of safety. There is a lot of body positivity and acceptance that you don't see everywhere else. And it really is unique. So, yeah, those are all really strange things to have to grapple with. But in terms of like being on stage, to me, there was a period of my life where I just like would not dress up at all going on stage. I would really just be very casual, very consciously casual. And so I think it's just an ongoing battle. I don't know if there's ever like a solution. I think people have so many different perceptions that are a lot of the time really misled about women. So this is something I think about a lot and deal with a lot. And in terms of men, I think, if I ever had a child, I would not allow them to perform during like their formative years and have to deal with being preyed upon by, so many men, like so many inappropriate situations I've found myself in from the time I was 17 just by being on stage. So, yeah, that's a really good
Yeah.
question.
Well, we're
Yeah.
talking, I mean, in general, safety, right? I mean, some of the things that, audience or listeners, you can't take, you know, there's a lot of assumptions that are back
Oh,
behind,
yeah.
as far as, for safety and the vulnerability. And I know, you know, I have deep respect for those who go on the stage. I'm always in awe of, artists out on the stage, of comedians, of one person performing aerial tricks that it's all up to them. It's just in awe, but it's so much that goes into it. And I engage in performance, not in that same way, but it's a lot. It's a lot,
There's a
and
lot.
and
Yeah.
when you've done it well, it just everything feels natural, and you go away, and
Yeah.
everybody's like, "Oh, that was natural," and yeah, it was natural, but I did a shit ton of work
Yeah.
to
And
pull
sometimes it's really
that one
beautiful.
off.
It's a really beautiful experience to perform. Like I've had, really spiritual experiences performing, and other times not so much. But yeah, it is. There's a lot that goes into it, and it's nice to feel appreciated. I think um, I really liked that. Just even being on the West Coast, like the level of appreciation is very high um, in terms of people listening. So that's really cool.
Yeah, yeah, excellent. I have a couple other questions for you, but I'm going to throw the big one in there, maybe to kind of get it out of the way and have you
Okay.
kick it around. The Why is there something rather than nothing at all? Why
Yeah.
this is the big one, and feel free, because it's too big and to really, but take some kicks at it or master this one.
No, that's a good question. Um, I've sat with that a lot and, staring at the walls. And sometimes I really think that life is very random and chaotic and purposeless. And we can all kind of get into that thinking. But then there's something, optimistic in me that says that we kind of are here to fulfill a purpose. And like that's kind of religion based. And I grew up in a Catholic family, so I, had a lot of that thinking, just I don't want to say positive, but just that we are here and life has this meaning. But I do feel that way. I think as much as I've strayed from that, I think it colors my work too. I think there's a lot of positive imagery and connections, and there's like a lot of really beautiful somethings out there. I think we're here to create something. Essentially, I don't I don't know if I believe that nothing exists. I think there's always something that precedes something, and that all kind of goes back to creation too, and creating things. I think art is kind of what's between the lines, and even if it's like the subtext, and even if something isn't quite formed, there's always like the possibility that something can form, and that's really a beautiful part of living, that we have the capacity to do that as humans. And we live in a place where that can happen. But yeah, I mean, I've watched a lot of podcasts and read books, and yeah, it's a big question, but I like to be positive about it and think that we all have a purpose, and there's a reason for it all. Yeah.
I was deeply listening to this. I thank you for your answer. Yeah, and I think about it a lot of the times, no matter how I ask, and kind of like the way they answered around creativity and doing something, and expression. So, listeners, Anna Mae has uh, a bunch of music, and you've heard she writes. Anna, can you tell us, as far as before getting into where to find all your stuff, but like, I just wanted to ask you while I have you here, like, are there things that you're working on right now, or certain type of themes, or something that's connecting with you as an artist right now as you move forward, through the summer into fall of 2023?
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of live performance, and last year I had a very quiet summer where I did a lot of writing. So I have a lot of songs that I want to put on an album. So that's probably going to happen maybe fall or winter, I think, when things settle down. But I'm always writing. I always have tons of notes and notebooks, and it's overwhelming how much content I have, especially the last couple months. And so there's songs to be written. There's a lot of songs that are already done. I do want to venture into doing something with a band. Kind of feels like the right time to do that. So far, Steve and I have worked on just really like sparse arrangements, really lyrically driven pieces, which I love doing. But I have some really lengthy songs. I have even a 15-minute long song, which I'm really like interested to kind of fool around with recording. And just a lot of pieces, like a lot of older pieces that I never recorded. So I'm planning something, but it's in the very preliminary stages. So I'll be releasing a couple singles that I've recorded in the last year over like the next month. So I think there's 3 more of those that are going to come out, but that's all kind of from like a year ago. But I'm excited for what's next. I just have like an insane number of songs, and it's very overwhelming. I don't know what to do with them.
Well, you will. I mean, you will grapple and deal with your creations. I was in listening to you. I could even see it think about these songs and like what you might do with them. Where do listeners find your work? Where do they get what's out there and not in your head at the
Yeah, I
moment?
know, not in my head. Yeah, what is real and what is actually still in my head. I always direct people to Bandcamp because Bandcamp is kind of a good artist friendly site where you can buy the music, you can preview the music. So anime.bandcamp.com. I have some things on Spotify. I don't have all of my albums on Spotify, but a good chunk of them. So I think if you just search me on Spotify. And then I've gotten to do some videos over the last couple of months, which have been really fun. And those are on my YouTube. So it's just YouTube /anime folk, animemusic.com, and then just like Facebook and Instagram. My Instagram it's actually it's a Woody Allen movie and a Louis Armstrong song, so it's Stardust Memory.
I know Stardust Memories.
I don't know if you know that movie. It's kind
I
of
sure do. I sure do.
Yeah, that's a very philosophically heavy movie.
It is. I haven't seen in a while. Stardust Memory. I saw that name there, and I oh yeah, it pulled me back. Definitely unique film and very very creative and thought heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's great to be able to find you there, and folks, you've heard Anime talk about playing live and keep an eye out. I'm just so excited to be able to talk to you and to have you on the program and the connections with Connecticut. So I was trying to figure out if I'd ride you a little bit on the Connecticut stuff with Rhode Island, but you love Rhode Island, so it's like, hey, I don't have to do that East Coast thing, Connecticut, Rhode Island. We're all good. But it's nice to connect you that way, and I know you're making out to the West Coast. But I want to thank you for creating your art, and also even on something like when you're talking about introvert, extrovert, and being able to perform. I think everybody figures that out for themselves, because I've had dominant years of extreme introversion that people wouldn't believe right now, but I just have as part of my makeup, and we're complicated in that way. But I wanted to thank you for what you do.
Thank you
to do that music and
back
get
at
out
you.
there and perform. Yeah,
Thank you for what you do.
absolutely. Everybody, check out Anime. It's been a great pleasure to talk to you here on the Something Rather Than Nothing podcast, and to have your music as well, because this is a music and story heavy show. So Deep, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It's fun.
Bitterly and gingerly forming
This is Something Rather Than Nothing.
And listeners, to stay connected with us and our guests, visit somethingratherthannothing.com. Join our mailing list for exclusive updates and access to guest-created art. If you enjoyed this episode or any episode, please like, subscribe, and leave a review on your podcast platform. People really read that shit. Your support helps us reach more listeners and spread our community across the planet. This is a global show, and we like to give a shout out to our many listeners across the world, including many listeners in Canada, Spain, Germany, UK, Argentina, Brazil, India, Thailand, and so many more places. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Something Rather Than Nothing Podcast for behind the scenes content. And the best way to help the show is to tell your friends about us. If you love it, they'll love it too. Tell your friends who love it. We love you. This is Something Rather Than Nothing Podcast.